I'm Doc Beisel, orthopedic surgeon with Move Smarter Health. We are sponsored by an educational grant from Kinesi Movement. I love sports. I love talking about injuries. I take care of shoulder and knee injuries, and I operate and treat on them. And please consider this an educational, informative video only. Here we go. So we're talking hamstrings today. So hamstring injuries, pretty common, right? Lots of injuries out there. And not only this, so now if you get a hamstring strain, like pretty severe strain, let's just say it's grade 2, grade 3, maybe even a grade 1 tear, you're gonna be out for a few weeks. You're gonna be recovering, rehab, you're gonna do all the usual stuff. And I mean, this is just like plain old me and us regular, public people, right? Like we're not the famous pro stars, right? It's still gonna take a little while. Oh, my voice. But you got these athletes, they're playing. Why? It's the playoffs. Of course you're gonna play. Like, do you really think that Connor McDavid would not play in the Olympics or World Championship or in the playoffs? Of course not. Yeah, we're not talking about Connor McDavid. He's just #1 hockey player, so he's just up there for good looks. Like me. So, hamstring injuries. What are they doing? Okay, so we know the basics, right? The hamstring goes all the way down, crosses the knee, goes from above the hip to below the knee. We have to stop this isolationist thinking with joints and muscles. Hamstrings is not just about the knee. It's beyond that. It's the entire limb. It affects your spine. It affects the pelvis. It affects everything along from top to bottom. Why, you say? Good question. Well, if you have the pelvis and you have a hamstring attached to it, if it's tight, what's it going to do? Or if it's tight here, but you want to keep your spine or your flat, then you might go, and then you bend the knee, everything's tight. So you have a bent knee and you want to straighten your spine, then you walk with a bent knee and you tilt your pelvis. And if you tilt your pelvis, then it affects your spine and your entire spinal column from here all the way down, right? And then what do the hamstrings affect? They then affect the lower leg, the calf, all of that. The entire neuromuscular kinematic connection from top to bottom is affected. And so that can take a while to recover because it's not just the hamstring bruise, Charlie horse for the quads, for example, you get a bruised hamstring, all sorts of things. You get a partial tear, you get a severe strain. You need to relax the muscle, you need to hydrate, you need to stretch it out, you need to build it up, you need to get metabolites, nutrition, get out the lactic acid. You need time for the muscle to recover. Now, traditionally, we sort of have used like the 6-week rule. It's like, you need 6 weeks because that's the biology. That is somewhat the biology, but what is the biology in a super athlete or in the real world? If say we had a microscope looking at all those cells, or a nanoscope, look at the nanomere connections between the muscles, whole different sarcomere length and all that, a whole different ballgame. Like what's happening with the recovery? Maybe they do a regenerative injection. Maybe they throw some stem cells in. Stem cells is a bad word in some situations, different overseas versus the US. Regenerative technologies can be administered and injected, different formats. There's ice therapy, cold therapy, laser therapy, cold laser, all sorts of fancy things that can be done. And you can do that daily, every day. Not us, not me. I can't afford that. But these super athletes can. You got trainers every day. You got physical therapists doing the stretching, doing the rehab, doing all this recovery. So when it comes to, Garoppolo recovered from his ACL that quickly. So why can't I, right? Well, in the end, it's all about willpower, biology, recovery, mental aptitude, confidence, and desire to get back into the game. Now, I'm not saying that you or I might take a sick day. Sure, why not? But a sick day for a super athlete means he may not get that bonus. He may not be playing in the playoffs. And if he doesn't play in the playoffs, he can't show what he can do. And if he can't show what he can do and help his team out and his desire to win, because it's his passion to play. That passion to play is a motivator and driver. For a lot of us, we have passions in all sorts of things. So it's a different motivator, right? They want to play, that's their earning, and they love the game because that's what they do. So how are they getting back so quickly? We all heard about the coach at Penn State who allegedly was forcing players to go back on the field, and then the Penn State team doctor won the lawsuit, but there was no direct connection. Anyway, a whole controversy, right? But in the end, there's the medical necessity, there's the medical treatment guidelines, and then there's the athlete who's saying, I'm gonna play. And what are the rules? Like, are there rules that say if there's truly a medical decision you cannot play, how much is that actually relayed to the player if he wants to play and take that risk? And if he takes that risk, then what happens? What about the insurance? What if he gets injured really badly and then the insurance says, well, you decided to play, we're not going to cover you or cover the team because you let him play when he had an injury. There's a lot of variables and factors. I don't know. That's a whole gray zone of information. And that's where like objective data would be great, right? You get objective metrics. You get true scrutiny where you get true motion intelligence in the real world. And what happens in that case is you get an objective metric saying, oh, he's got a good score for stability, function, mobility, agility, and strength and power. He is good to go in 4 weeks, whereas you or I mean, we might not be good to go until 12 or 18 weeks. And so that's actually part of the beauty of what we're doing with kinesi, but I'm using that as an example to say that that objective metric in the real world, evaluating that limb is not necessarily there. It would be great if we had it. So, because right now, when you don't have that, we're limited with the desire to play and okay, it feels good, it feels strong, I'm able to walk, I'm able to run, I can do this, I'm gonna push through it. These are super athletes. So what we can do with the same injury is going to be completely different from what they can do. So they get a lot more resources. There's a lot of things that they're doing with training, rehab, nutrition, metabolites, amino acids, proteins, peptides. I mean, pick something that you've heard about that's popular on TikTok and someone is using it, right? Or talking about it, right? Peptides is so popular right now. What's the data on it? And it's variable, it's mixed, right? You know, there's a lot of people that are pros and cons. I mean, I can't say it's terrible. I can tell you smoking and nicotine is bad, but I can't tell you that this peptide is wrong or that regenerative technology is bad or wrong in certain indications because it all depends on what the constituents of the material are. For example, regenerative technology. If you don't have enough cells, you're not going to have regenerative technology. Well, some studies shows it doesn't matter in some particular cases. In other cases, peptides show value. In other cases, they don't. Hormones, synthetic hormones, growth hormones was really popular for a while. Steroids, I mean, obviously we've banned most, if not all of those. Blood doping, all of those things, which I'm definitely not saying these athletes are doing. What I'm saying is that we've gone through this flux. Like, at what point do we draw the line of, is regenerative technology just fancy blood doping?
For a hamstring, would something like stem cells help a hamstring heal faster?
So, instead of sort of looking at it from a stem cells, like if we look at it from regenerative technology in general, could it help it heal faster? There are people that believe it does. Like if you do anything in a lab or in an animal model, it'll work. It works amazingly. Like, so you can't always trust these animal models. I mean, I've sat on various, reviews for grants and you look at the data, you probe down into the scientific scrutiny of the data, and you have to evaluate what are the metrics they're using, how are they defining this. But sometimes some of that data is so focused, it's only applicable to a rat model of this breed, of this variety, with this type of injury, based on this transection, it may not have the translation real world conversion. So what happens in an animal model or in the lab is very different from what happens in the real world. So there's a lot of data that says things are wonderful, but is there data that says it actually works in humans in a long-term, durable, reliable, repeatable, validated method, model, and implementation and workflow? Most of the times, not necessarily. There's great regenerative technology out there. Some of it's used a lot in the EU or in Europe or Asia, and some of it is not allowed based on FDA scrutiny. Which is fine. I mean, hey, the FDA is here to protect the public. I mean, someone's got to sort of make sure that things are safe. For example, there's a lot of vitamins and minerals out there that have never been evaluated by the FDA, and yet they're making all these claims, like claims that they're actually, treating disease. And when I see this, I'm like, how are they getting away with this? And part of it is that the FDA doesn't have the manpower to go after all these companies. And eventually they do capture some of them, but it's a challenge. So you can't trust what someone says if there hasn't been regulatory scrutiny on a lot of these health products. And these health products, if they're a health product and they're saying that they can, improve your kidney health, how is that not a claim that they have a medical improvement for treatment? So it's a challenge.
And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
So the next question would be, how are these athletes able to push through a tight hamstring or a partially torn, or a sprained hamstring? Well, there are so many things. Painkillers, anti-inflammatory, not narcotics, obviously. When I say painkillers, you got anti-inflammatories, Tylenol, various other treatments. You got topical analgesics, the sprays, icy hot, cold therapy, all of these things. And then warming up your muscles, massages can make a big difference. If it's tight, you want to warm up the muscles, you want to loosen them up. Like, for example, what do Formula One cars do on the track? Well, until it's race ready, those tires are wrapped in a warm wrap blanket. Like, it's a fancy blanket for tires, right? Like probably just the blankets cost several $1,000s, right, for these massive tires. So what are they doing? They're going to be warming up. They're going to be keeping it loose. Are they doing sauna, hot tub, cold plunge? Like, they're doing it all. Like, they're doing whatever they can to push themselves, right? They're going to take an ibuprofen. I mean, I've heard of some crazy things that top athletes take. Like, they'll have a Coke, right? They just give them some energy, give them some sugar. They'll douse themselves with what they need within legal framework, just to be able to play. So absolutely, they're going to push through. They're going to work hard. Like, we saw, like, you see it. Hockey playoffs are like brutal, right? I love hockey. So they'll push through some of the worst injuries. And so, and that's a challenge. Like, we can just sort of sit back and not push through. But say we don't have any sick days left and we got to work. We don't want to lose our job. We're going to push through it. Well, these athletes take it to a different level. They're going to push through this. They're going to prep. They're going to warm up. They're going to do, just sort of like, whatever it is. I'm kind of hopping here, right? Like, is this what they do? No, they don't dance. Well, maybe they dance, but they're going to be doing all sorts of exercises to warm up the muscles. They're going to be taking anti-inflammatories. Maybe they have a whole regimen. Every sports doc, every team doc, every team, every organization, every athlete with their private trainer, private coach, private sports doc, they all have their routine and workflow that they kind of work through. And then it becomes down to patient, physician say, hey, I want to play. What can you do for me? All right, well, let's come up with a routine. We do some kinetic taping, do some sprays, do some anti-inflammatories, do some Tylenol, do a warm bath, cold plunge, massage, deep tissue, work on the heat, warm up the muscles. So from the standpoint of what can you do? Can you put a brace on for a hamstring? No, not really. I mean, braces will help for stability of the knee. You might have a brace, some kind of a sling for the arm, or you have a hip brace, but you're not going to be using that. You might put a lot of padding around it to prevent re-injury. People tape up these joints to kind of stiffen up the overall, like if you think of the thigh as kind of like a water balloon, you kind of tighten it up, stiffen it up with tape. Kinetic taping helps prevent sort of those strains. So they kind of help stabilize things from some perspective, provide you proprioceptive feedback in some respects. And taping goes back centuries of use. Like you wrap it, you tape it, you compress it, you can help with that. But there's really not a brace that you can use for hamstring injuries that you can really have unlimited motion when you play. Tape's probably the closest thing, and whether it's a kinetic tape, whether it's a 3M, whether it's a Scotch tape, no. But you have all these fancy therapeutic tapes and kinetic tapes that you can use. But for the most part, you don't want any restrictions. And the commonest you can see is like if someone has finger injuries, you see their fingers wrapped. Elbow wrap. They might be putting some taping. Cupping, sort of like during the rehab process. All sorts of complementary alternative medicine. I don't want to say voodoo because there's good evidence that complementary alternative medicine works, whether it's acupuncture, cupping, all sorts of various acupressure, deep tissue techniques. Rolfing is a great one. So for sure, but there's really not a lot physically from a brace standpoint that you can use currently for the hamstring.
So basically everybody that's with a hamstring injury that's going to play this weekend is just manning up and playing.
Yeah. So if there's one thing left, it's like when it comes to a hamstring injury, just man up.